Folks, welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Evan Saint-Gerard. The purpose of watching this webinar is downsizing without stress, selling the family home. For many homeowners and families, downsizing is much more than just selling a property. There's emotional attachment, family conversation, financial planning, organizing decades of belongings, and figuring out our next chapter. Our goal tonight is to make sure that we can help you make the process feel like a little less overwhelming by discussing the real estate, legal, and logistics sides of downsizing. I'm going to have my panel introduce themselves. Ladies, let's start with Leslie.
Hi guys, I'm Leslie Sultan. I am an estate planning attorney with Sammartino and Sultan Law Group. Our main office is in Long Island, but we are spread out throughout the Long Island and the city. And we focus on all things estate planning, probate, guardianship, but ideally we love to help people set up trusts to avoid probate and avoid other court processes.
Next up, Adriana.
Hi, I'm Andrea Martone. I'm from Moves for Seniors. We're a national company that does moving, obviously, local and long distance, as well as front-end services such as downsizing, packing, home cleanouts, floor planning, as well as resettling once you're in your new space. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, ladies. All right, so one of the biggest things that we see that many families they wait too long to start the planning because the process feels emotionally overwhelming. A lot of the people think downsizing means that they're going to give up something, and many of the times, actually, it's just simplifying your life and creating less stress when you're moving forward. And I just want to go over some of the people who are watching this, what they're watching it for. It's mostly we're going to talk about the common reasons people download, empty nesters, maintenance becoming too much, there's accessibility, relocating closer to family, and retirement transitions. So one of the questions that usually pops up for us is, what are some of the biggest mistakes families make? The answers that usually come up for us is basically wait too long, they're not decluttering early, not discussing the plan with the family, and over improving the house. And then the other one is emotional pricing. You have to have the conversation with your professional so you know exactly what the plan's going to be. A lot of times we talk about preparing the home for sale. There's not just getting the house cleaned up and decluttered, but it's also having a plan. What are we going to do, especially if we have parents that we're selling their homes for them and we're moving them from one point to the next place? What is the plan? What does the plan look like? Are all the family members on the same page when it comes to this? Are the parents okay with this? We have to make sure we're doing the best for the family member that we're helping out. And we also want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because it doesn't work if everybody's not on the same page. What updates matter and what updates don't? That's the thing you definitely got to sit down with your real estate professional to discuss that. And why decluttering matters, I'm going to let Andrea, she's going to talk about that. It really helps out your house. They're not going to buy something if they can't see it. So if there's too much clutter, it kind of fogs up their vision of seeing what the potential could be for them and their needs. And we want to set the expectations in every conversation that we're having when it comes to selling the property. Timing the process is very important as well. We go through the whole process when we sit down and have a consultation with you, what to expect, and so you know what your next move is. So Leslie, one thing that I see often is families focusing only on the move itself, but not necessarily preparing for legalities beforehand. What are some of the most important legal conversations families should be having before downsizing?
Great question. Yeah, obviously, I have conversations about dying and healthcare and stuff, but this is a little lighter. Is there any beneficiaries on the house? Are there co-owners? Making sure everybody that can sign are able to sign for the house. Sometimes parents add their children. That's not usually a good idea. So ideally get the children off the house and then have the parents sign, and to doing transfers. And then where are we going to put the proceeds? If it's in a bank account, does that mean it's going to wind up in probate? Is there a way to create a trust that would avoid probate and potentially allow the parent to qualify for Medicaid and not have to spend down any life savings that could otherwise be an inheritance? So I think that's sort of those long-term discussions.
All right, Leslie, you also prepared a presentation that you wanted to share, so I'm going to let you dive in and feel free to share whenever you're ready.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen and load it up. So, one of the things that most people are concerned about is how can they preserve any real estate, or if they're going to be downsizing, the value and the long-term wealth. I always like to introduce that I am a working mom. I have 2 children, so I do come to estate planning as a parent of minor children, which is something important to think about. I'm also a business owner, so if somebody else is a business owner, there's these things that we have to consider because the business is a separate legal entity and needs estate planning. And I was the daughter of a mother who had dementia, and we were able to set her up with a Medicaid trust. She did pass last year, unfortunately. So I've also gone through that whole experience. I come here not just as an attorney, but as somebody very familiar with estate planning. So what is estate planning? It means making a plan in advance that establishes who will receive your assets and who will carry out your wishes when you become incapacitated or after you die. So it's 2 parts, the assets and incapacity. Of course, it can help to make financial and medical decisions when you become incapacitated. So when we're talking about real estate, what are the long-term plans? Is it to sell it? Is it for the children to inherit it and leave this, family legacy of a house? How does that look when there's multiple children, right? You can't split a house. So really having these questions about, is it the house, the value of the house, etc. What happens if mom or dad become incapacitated? Who would manage the mortgage payments or the taxes? And of course, who would make financial and medical decisions if someone becomes incapacitated? But I'm going to focus mostly on the real estate side. And where I always like to begin is with probate, because probate is the process involving the surrogate's court for when someone dies with or without a will. And what most people don't know is the history of probate and why it was created. And most people I've heard say, well, I don't need to take care of anything. My children will deal with it. But essentially what that means is going through the court means it's opening it up to creditors. So the whole probate system is actually designed to allow creditors to come in and take what's owed to them, which, encourages a credit-based system. Back in old English days, nobody, the family the heirs would inherit the debt and they would be indebted to the creditors. And that was done away with. And so now creditors can only go after what's left in your name, what's in your estate when you die. And so probate is essentially that process. And so creditors always come first, and most people don't think about that. So the family comes last in terms of inheriting. The other thing I always like to mention to people is how long probate can take. So specifically in New York City, it could take anywhere from a few weeks if it's a small estate, which is less than 50,000, to several years. And I know Evans could probably talk about some experiences of delayed probates in New York City. And the cost of probate obviously can range, but attorneys, if you're hiring an attorney, they usually charge an hourly rate, $450 to $800 per hour. So this obviously adds up very quickly. There's a filing fee. So the state of New York surrogate's court is the most expensive court in the state. It can be up to $1,300 to file a will or to ask for an administrator to be appointed. And it's, of course, what most people don't realize is when their estate is in probate, all of the accounts are frozen. So nobody has access to the money. And this is obviously to protect it, to make sure the right people will inherit it. But it also means, how do they pay for the legal fees? How do they pay the mortgage or the taxes? So what we've seen happening is attorneys take what's called a contingency fee. And let's say they took something as low as 5% on a house that's worth $1 million. That now means that the attorney's going to get $50,000, which otherwise would have gone to the family if the court process wasn't involved. So, that's one of the biggest problems we've seen. So a lot of people say, well, I've done a will. Everything's taken care of. If I have a will, can I avoid probate? And the answer is no. A will has to be verified and acknowledged by a judge. And the word probate literally means to prove. You have to prove that that will is valid. And so during that probate process, no assets can be transferred. The house cannot be sold. If there's rental income and a tenant, no rents can be collected. Nobody has the authority to collect the rent. No expenses can be reimbursed until the administrator or executor is appointed. And then sometimes you still have to have a judge approve things. It can get very complicated. And again, creditors always come first. So they're going to take from the top before the family receives, even in a will scenario. So hopefully your next thought is, how can I avoid probate? And one of the easiest ways is by creating a trust and having the trust own the assets. So this literally means your house comes out of your name and goes into the name of your trust. So if I have my house in my name, Leslie Sultan, I create the Leslie Sultan Trust. I do a deed transfer and I transfer the house to the trust. If I own shares of a co-op, I have to get permission from the co-op and we transfer the shares to the trust. Bank accounts, retirement accounts can either have the trust as a beneficiary or be retitled. So that would be something you'd speak to your estate planning attorney or financial advisor about. But the beauty of the trust is it maintains control over your assets during your life. And then the assets automatically transfer, the control transfers to the successor trustees automatically without the need for any court intervention. And then the trust has the instructions, just like a will. I leave everything to my children equally, and then the new trustee can transfer everything. So this is exactly what happened with my mom. My mom had a trust. We had moved her assets into it. And after she passed away, I never had to go to court. I just wrote checks because I was the successor trustee. So that's the great part. The trustees do not need authority to maintain the trust. They can automatically start collecting the rent, pay bills, writing checks, etc. So a lot of people feel overwhelmed by a trust. They think, oh, that's for the uber rich, but it's really just a legal contract. It's a written agreement between the creator of the trust, the grantor, the person creating it and putting their assets into it, and the trustee, which can be myself if I'm doing a revocable trust, or an irrevocable trust means I'm appointing someone else to be the trustee. And they provide legal protection for the assets and just ensure that they're distributed without going to court. Now, social media is doing a lot of good in educating people about trusts, but one of the things I hear a lot is about trusts offering asset protection. We in New York, trusts don't typically offer asset protection, especially a revocable trust. It's mostly a probate avoidance tool, and it protects the privacy of the assets and the owner, and sometimes can minimize estate taxes. But as long as I'm in control, I'm the trustee, I'm the grantor, I'm not going to get the asset protection that a lot of the social media talks about. It's only if there's a third party and there's a lot of restrictions in the trust language, which we won't get into today, that there can be asset protection. But one of the things that we typically do in terms of helping to preserve some of the assets is a Medicaid trust, because this is a way to allow the homeowner to qualify for long-term care Medicaid if they needed to go into a nursing home or to stay in their home and have the aides come in and take care of them, rather than spending down their entire life savings or qualifying for Medicaid because they only own a house, but Medicaid then goes after the house when they die to recoup the expenses. The Medicaid trust would protect those assets. So in that case, if I'm creating the trust for a Medicaid trust, I'm the grantor, but I'm appointing someone else as the trustee, and they are sort of holding the assets for the benefit of myself if I needed them, or for my children or beneficiaries. Now, some people get a little nervous. Why would I give all my assets in a trust that someone else is managing? But it's because I can always change the beneficiaries. I can always change the trustee. I'm still going to receive all of my income. It's really just protecting the assets for the inheritance that you're hopefully intending them to be used for. So Medicaid long-term care is really great, especially in New York. We have a very robust Medicaid system that will cover essentially all of the nursing home care or in-home care, but there are some qualifications. So you have to be over 65, blind or disabled, a resident of New York State. I believe now it's no longer 2 activities of daily living. In some cases, sometimes it's 3 activities of daily living. But if you're not able to bathe yourself, toilet, groom, dress yourself, etc., and you need help, then you would be qualified for receiving the long-term care aids. You do have to put anything over about $32,000 into the trust, but you're still entitled to use whatever is in there, $32,000 for your own benefit. And the main thing that I'd like to emphasize with creating a trust, and sometimes we see this, people have a trust, but they don't fund the trust. They don't move their assets into the trust. So this example is this little girl with her red wagon. The red wagon represents the trust, and all the assets in it all the toys are her assets. So the goal is you have to move them out of your name. She's no longer holding them. They're in her red wagon, and that's what avoids probate. But in some cases, people forget or they don't know and they leave the assets out and they're not in the red wagon. And so anything not included does have to go through probate. So, the trick with creating a trust is, for some people, they download a trust and they create one online and then they don't know that they have to fund it and move their assets into it. So it's really important to work with an experienced estate planning attorney to make sure that the trust can really work and control the assets and keep everybody out of court. And then I always love to talk about in a more comprehensive way with estate planning is really important to do a power of attorney. So power of attorney is while you're alive, you would give someone else the ability to manage your legal and financial decisions. A trust can also do that, which is another way that a trust is a benefit over a will, because a will cannot do any incapacity planning. So anything owned by the trust usually has language for incapacity. Another trustee can take over. But you can't always put everything in the trust. Like, sometimes a co-op can't be in the trust. So power of attorney is a great other tool. We always do them together. So trust, power of attorney, etc. And, we saw during COVID, people were using power of attorneys, not because they were incapacitated, because they were stuck in another country and someone else was able to act on their behalf. So it can cover physical incapacity, they're somewhere else, and also mental incapacity, coma, dementia, etc. So this is my screen with my information, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. But otherwise, thank you for letting me do this quick little presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Leslie, thank you so much. We have a couple questions from the audience. The first one is from Robert. What legal documents should a homeowner make sure to update?
Great. Okay. So, we always want to double check the beneficiaries on any bank accounts, right? Some people do this every year. We recommend every 3 years. Are the beneficiaries on those accounts who you still want to receive those accounts, those assets? Of course, if you do have a will or a trust, it's always good to look at them, review them, make sure they still honor your wishes. And of course, the power of attorney. And we always like the healthcare proxies. So power of attorney is only for legal financial decisions. Healthcare proxies making healthcare decisions.
When should families involve the attorney in the downsizing process?
Yeah, great question. I would say if you're in the process of selling, and you already have a real estate contract, that's been executed, that's a great time to consider speaking with an estate planning attorney. Generally, if you're creating a trust, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. So that does give you time if you're in New York and you're selling property, which tends to take, 2 to 3 months. Because if you're going to be buying a new property, even if it's a downsized property, you want to make sure it's owned by the trust. Because once you own something in your name, again, you have to transfer it. So the easiest way is create the trust and then buy the new asset in the trust. So I would say, in conjunction with the sale or right after the contract signed.
I think you kind of answered this one already, but I'm going to ask the question again. This is from Angela. What are some of the common mistakes families make from the estate planning standpoint?
Well, the most common one I've seen, and I didn't mention, so I'm glad you asked that question, Angela, is parents are adding their children to the deed. And that is a great option for avoiding probate, because now they're joint owners, or they are entitled, and so they will inherit the house and will not have to go through probate. But the problem with doing that is something that we call capital gains tax, and they lose what's called the step-up basis. So to briefly just explain it, when you buy a house in 1980 and it's worth $100,000, and then you try to sell it in 2026 and it's worth $1 million, there's a gain of $900,000. So if you sell it during your lifetime, you would pay a tax on a portion of that $900,000, and the tax is high. Now, when you add your children to the deed, even though you may pass away and they will inherit it, now if they turn around and sell it, they are going to pay the tax just as if they were the original owner. So we don't like adding children to the deed for that reason. It's always better if they inherit the property. And inheritance is not just necessarily a trust. It's with a will, without a will, or the trust. As long as you die and they inherit it, they receive what's called the step-up basis. So the basis jumps from the original purchase price to the date of death value. And so you always want your children to receive the maximum value. And so if you don't name them on the title, they will be able to receive the step-up basis. So that's where estate planning solves that. You can put the house in the trust. They'll receive it when you pass away, and they get the step-up basis.
What situations create the most family conflicts during this transition?
Well, I mean, it's definitely like leaving a house to several people. Sometimes what we've seen is the bank accounts will have a beneficiary, but then the house gets divided amongst the kids. So whoever's the beneficiaries on those bank accounts, sometimes it's a spouse. So they're going to get all the money, the kids get the house, but they don't have any of the money to pay for the house. So it's really, making sure you're looking at things in a comprehensive way, working with an estate planning attorney to look at the different outcomes, because little things like that can have really big consequences. So really working with an estate planning attorney instead of just like, oh, I'll quick fix, I'll Google this solution, and sort of trying to quickly solve it without, that more comprehensive plan.
Once families decide it's time to move, the next step is to actually process the downsizing and organizing the years and sometimes decades. You also want to find out, what are you going to do with the stuff? What's your plan? So Andrea, what are some of the biggest emotional and logistic challenges families face?
Emotionally, they've lived in a house for, could be 40 years, raised a family, have tons of Christmas decorations, and they just have really never started thinking about, well, what am I going to do when I leave this? So emotionally, there's a lot of items there that hold sentimental value that they might not be ready to face.
So I understand you have a presentation that you wanted to share
Yes.
with us as well.
Sure.
So feel free.
Thank you for joining me. I'm just going to give you some practical tips when, going through this downsizing process and possibly moving process. I'm going to approach this from the angle that you are planning a move. But yeah, you can downsize without actually moving. So these are the practical tips that I'm going to start with, and then we'll get into some benefits of help. This image probably represents how you feel about downsizing, and you're not alone. Downsizing and moving is one of the most stressful life events. It's behind death of a loved one and divorce, and it's number 3 on the list of most stressful life events. It's ahead of major illness and losing a job. So yeah, it's that much. But with an organized approach and with the right mindset and even some professional help, it could be a very freeing process. And when you're on the other side of it, you'll be very grateful, and it's a huge accomplishment. So these are 5 tips to keep in mind as you get started, to start early. And I think, Evans, you mentioned that before. Early is relative to how much time you have. But even if it's in your mind that this is coming, you might want to get started. A small project, just one day a week, can build some momentum. And it's important to start where you don't have urgency, because then you have more control of what's going to happen. I've seen people really quickly, like, we just have to go in and move everything and make quick decisions. So we don't want that. You don't have to go through that. And also, moving is cheaper when you have less stuff. So it's something to keep in mind. We talked about the emotional aspect. So some people aren't emotional about things, and you don't have to feel guilty about that. But they, a lot of the items here represent a big part of your life, and that's okay if you get emotional. Legacy gifts, this is an important way to maybe gift something that you had someone in mind to give it to. So maybe it's like a sentimental piece that you could tell them the story of, and they can enjoy now. It will mean more to them given in that way. This is probably one of the most important points, is to be realistic about what you can and can't do on your own. Do you have family nearby that can help? Do you have physical limitations? Are you a decisive person? What percentage of things will stay and go? And how urgent is your timeline? So you want to then identify tasks that you might want help for. Are you good with making quick decisions, or do you need someone who's objective, being like, no, you don't need that, you're going to need this, or that's too many dishes, you only need 4. And if you have physical limitations, obviously the moving of items, carrying them, lifting them, you're going to need help there. These are 2 books that we recommend if you have the luxury of time to read them to prepare for your move. Floor planning is a service that we offer, and anyone can pretty much do it. Depending on where you're going, you're usually given a floor plan, whether it's a new home or a senior living community. You could take measurements and make your own and measure your furniture just to see what your proper layout will be. And you want to keep your new space as safe as possible, not over cluttered, and take the items that will have the best purpose. So we'll get into that later. So now we're kind of ready to start. Are you overwhelmed? We recommend starting small. If you like a bathroom or a linen closet, you can kind of handle that in a small way quickly. If you're really eager to get going, you want to get a lot of impact, I would recommend like a basement or a garage or even the attic. And if you're in a hurry, which I see a lot, you have to just kind of focus on what you're going to need immediately. If you need to handle like then the master bedroom, the kitchen, bathroom, maybe a family room too. So this is really important, the supplies you need. And most important are these Post-it notes or labels. I like a color-coded system, and we'll talk about that next, where you can sort different categories. Obviously, trash bags, gloves if you're dealing with anything icky, boxes, packing tape, markers, and packing material. So now we're sorting. This is like my favorite part. And you're going to start labeling here. So you would start with a category of keep. Obviously, furniture that fits in the home, and your favorite items and any hobby supplies you have. Trash, anything broken, outdated, ripped, dirty, missing parts. You want to get that out of the space so you can really start visualizing what you have. Items to donate or give gifts. You might even want to have like a little open house with your friends and family of all the things that you want to get rid of and maybe they can find useful. You can be creative, give to a preschool. Sometimes they like things like wrapping paper, tissue paper, or art supplies. Nonprofits sometimes want office supplies, desks or desk chairs, things like that. And sell. This is a hard category, especially right now in this market. People think they have their items have a lot more value than they're actually worth, but there are ways to determine that. There's a resource you may have heard of on Google. You can use Google Lens, and that's to take a picture of something you have in front of you to see what it's selling for on the internet. So you might be connected to eBay or Facebook Marketplace or some other platforms. And in those, you want to see what the item sold for, not what it's being asked for. So now we'll just quickly look room by room. The kitchen is where you've accumulated a lot over the years. And you're probably not using a lot of the serving things anymore, or maybe pots and pans. You don't need every single size. Do you use fine china? So those are conversations you have to have with yourself to determine what you might get rid of. The living space, this is where that space planning really comes in handy because you're going to decide, usually, the room is planned around a television, and then you want to decide what would make the best sense to have in that space that doesn't take up too much room. So you can multi-purpose something. Maybe you don't need a TV stand. You could use a bookcase, or you could wall mount the TV. You could display things on a bookcase. You just don't want to overcrowd a space like that, especially if you have any limited mobility. You need a walker to go through the space. That has to be planned carefully. The bedroom, blankets and sheets, you need probably at least 2 sets, not more than that. Go through those closets and drawers. And under the bed, do you have space under the bed where you'll be using for storage in your new space? I personally have clothes of different sizes. We've all been through some life changes, but it might be time to think in which direction you might be heading and maybe get rid of the things that no longer fit. Any valuables that you have, you'd want to keep with you during the move. You would keep that personally on you, and maybe like important documents too. The office space, it's important to put together your most important documents, maybe in like a small file box. And like I just said, you could take that with you on move day. Shredding personal documents. Sometimes the town or library offer like shredding days. Maybe instead of having a small desk, you're a little creative about having like a box of office supplies you keep on a bookshelf if you can't fit an actual desk into your new space. One of my favorite tips is if you have computer electronics, a TV, the way that it's hooked up, it's scary to unplug that all. So because you don't know if you'll ever be able to get it back, but to take a picture of what that looks like all hooked up and label it all and put it in a Ziploc bag that says TV or computer, and then hopefully you can reconnect it all. It's just a little tip. Storage spaces, these are the big ones we talked earlier about: garage, basement, attic. They can be very full the longer that you've lived there. So things you haven't used in the last year or two, you'd want to donate. Holiday decorations, just keep, minimal of what you'd like to put out. So now the benefits of help. If you needed an outside person to come help, what I just went over is how you could help yourself. Any professional will come and do a free consultation, in-person meeting, assess the belongings and what you have and what your timeline is. For me, that is like one of the most important questions we ask. And we review your belongings and see how much work we really needs to happen and to make sure we have enough time to get it done. And then planning. We're planning to the space, as we talked about space planning, and we'll give you some deadlines with milestones. Pre-move, this is where like the real heavy lifting comes in. I use a lot of professional organizers to carry out this type of work with our customers. They have trouble sometimes with the sorting process and determining what needs to be donated and gotten rid of and what they're keeping. So we have them pack and sort at the same time and take away those items for donation. We can organize for junk removal as well. I hate that term, but it is useful. So it's just cleaning out bigger items in your home. And packing in advance of the move will take a big weight off your shoulders. Then there's also unpacking and resettling. So that's quickly and painlessly getting you into your new home. You can have someone come in, hang the pictures, make the bed, put your clothes away, and just make the whole room or the whole space move in ready for you. And what's a really big help there is removing the packing materials. I've seen a few people moved into new spaces and then they didn't go for this extra service and they're left with just a room full of boxes and they're really overwhelmed going through all those and breaking them down, opening them up and getting them out. So just really quick, these are the services that we provide. I mentioned before, local and long distance moving. We service 48 states. Downsizing, we've been talking about, clean out, space planning, packing and unpacking. We are also a specialty shipping company. So items that can't be shipped through UPS, we can provide shipping for. And we use that shipping arm of our company to offer another option for long distance moving. It's less expensive, but there are more timelines or longer timelines associated with it. So I'm here if you need anything. My name is Andrea, and my job is to take the stress out of the move and make your transition as smooth as possible. Thank you so much for having me, Evans.
Andrea, thank you for that presentation. We got a couple of questions for you. How early should the families begin organizing?
As soon as it's in your mind, do something. Start mentally planning if you can't physically do something.
What makes downsizing emotionally difficult for many seniors?
Oh yeah, they're making a big life change. I think it's exciting when you buy your first home and you're filling it with all the things that you love, and then to see that kind of come apart. And you are going into probably a nice other place, but it's just a lifetime of memories that you're kind of saying goodbye to. I'd be sad.
This one is from Stephanie. What advice would you give adult children helping the parents go through this process? For
them to assess, can they help? Do they want to help? Some people, this is just not in their wheelhouse and they don't have time, or it's just not like I said, in their wheelhouse, their scope of their abilities. So there is plenty of help. It's not just me. I have other resources too.
This one is from Suli. I think I pronounced her name correctly. How do you help families avoid being overwhelmed?
I literally was just meeting with someone who is so overwhelmed. And this woman had, I told her, one of the top 3 most organized, uncluttered houses that she had been in for 40 years, but she was so overwhelmed. But once you start talking and giving the practical tips of what they'll need to know about how they're going to move and what they need to know about moving day, what they'll need to know on the other end, what kind of help there is, it started to unravel. So just any advice. I mean, it's free advice. Me and anyone else that's in this business, we will come and meet with you for free to give you a consultation. You could pick our brain. And I feel like after those meetings, people really do feel better and more organized about their timeline.
All right, the next question, I cannot pronounce his name, so I'm going to butcher it. So I'm not going to try. What's something families underestimate about the moving process?
Maybe how long. So certain projects take longer than others. I recently had a woman in Brooklyn that lived in her 1-bedroom apartment for 40 years, and she was going to pack the day before her move. We gave her 60 hours of downsizing, packing, and pre-move organizing. I mean, like, she had no idea what the scope of the project was. Pack the day before my nephew, and she was physically not able to even do any of the work. Whew. Dodged a bullet there. So yeah, the realistic, but honestly, someone who hasn't done this before and hasn't done this in 40, 50 years, it's hard to really know what you're looking at.
That's a lot of great insight from both of you ladies. We're going to go through some of the most common asked questions families are reaching out and they want to know. I'm going to leave this open for all of the panel. How do we know when it's time to downsize? Whoever wants to go first.
If you're thinking of making any sort of change, or if you have things in your house that you're not using, there's 3 bedrooms that you're not using and there's things in them. I mean, you don't have to have them empty, but can we start going through some closets, and you'd be surprised what you find in there and what you can get rid of and shrink your stuff. And there's many organizations to donate to. Long Island's tough to donate furniture to, I will say, but if you have the time to play around on Facebook Marketplace and list things, even if you get rid of it for free, I mean, it's just such a lighter weight.
Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I don't think I have anything to add. I think she really hit all the points.
My answer is pretty simple. Depending on the situation, if it's your parents, they can no longer go up to the 2nd floor, then it might be time to downsize. If it's yourself, you can't go up and down the stairs anymore. Or better yet, your kids are out of the house and there's just more space than you need. It's time to downsize. It's depending on, it's case by case. It's whatever your life situation is at that moment. It's time to consult the professionals, see what your options are. The next question is, what should families do first? Leslie, you'll take this one first.
I mean, I think estate planning is usually long overdue for a lot of people. So I tell people, people say, what's the best age? I'm like 18, because that's when you become an autonomous individual and mommy and daddy can't make decisions for you anymore. Yeah, I mean, estate planning works no matter what. And if you you move your house into the trust and then you sell it a year later, you can buy a new, put the new property in the trust or try to coordinate all of it. But yeah, I mean, really important to get power of attorney, healthcare proxies, all that stuff in advance, because you never know. We got to always plan for tomorrow.
Andrea?
This was first steps. Is that what the question was?
What should families do first?
Yeah.
What's the first thing they should do?
Like I've been saying, assess your timeline and let's make some real, milestones to hit, and assess what kind of help you have and what your limitations are.
Just to be different, my answer is going to be have a conversation with the whole family. Make sure everybody's on board with what the plans are. If you're moving mom and dad, make sure your siblings are on board with everything. Make sure everybody consulted. If you don't talk to Billy, the kid that doesn't help the family member out that much, make sure Billy's included. Make sure you have a conversation with everybody. Make sure you speak to the parents, because you're making a decision for them. They should be included in this conversation. Next question. What if parents are emotionally attached to their home, which happens a lot? So whichever one of you guys want to take this one first.
Yeah, I think most people are, but to bring, elements of that home into the new home. And I like doing that space planning, giving them a floor plan where they can visualize, oh, this desk is still going to come and my headboard that goes with the bed, just to see it all in the new space and not just like, little dots on paper, but like that visual is really helpful. So, and make excitement about where they're going.
Leslie, same question.
This is not exactly my area, but it's unpacking the emotional stuff. I look at it more from like, you can't take it with you. So, how can we plan for the family to receive the maximum benefit? Is the house with a leaking ceiling and, moldy floors, what you want them to inherit, even though it had great memories for you? Or is there a way we can fix it up, sell it, and give them the value of the monetary value that they can then use and purchase something great for them?
And the next question is, should homeowners renovate before selling? I'll answer this one first. I try to keep the money in the seller's pocket as much as possible. The things that you should take care of, or anything that roof has leaks, take care of that. Boiler, anything in the basement, there's no leaks coming in from the outside, take care of that. Just the major things, the big ticket items, but I say focus on that. If it's grandma's house, I wouldn't update the kitchen, because whoever's purchasing it, most likely they're going to renovate it anyway. So your taste might not be exactly what the person who's purchasing, what their taste is going to be. Listen to your professional. Your professional is going to tell you basically what's going to merit you your money back. Ladies, either one of you want to take this question?
This is not my area of expertise. That is yours. We'll take your solution.
Okay.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think you have to really take the opinion of the professional realtor who sees the houses all day, sees what people are buying, what is the gain in investing in that way, and what could that money be better spent for?
All right. And our next question is, how long does downsizing usually take?
So it depends on where they're going. Moving a house to a smaller house, that could take a little longer. Most of the moves and the situations I'm involved in are moving into a senior living, and that could be 2 weeks. Some are a month, some are 1 week, some are one session if they're needing our help. But it's kind of hard to say. Every move, every situation is so different. There's hoarders, there's the minimalists like I saw today. So it kind of depends.
Leslie, same question.
I mean, I had to go through this with my mom. At the time that we were moving her, she didn't own a house, but she was living with her partner at the time. And we just, and she lived in California, I'm here in New York. So every trip it was like, let's get rid of some stuff. And then we moved her to one location, and that, she had a single room in a senior living, and then it was downsized to a roommate. And so we slowly just whittled away at everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it just depends on the circumstances, and it's hard. I mean, you've got all your furniture that you've loved and had in this big dining room, and now you in a little one bedroom. So, really thinking it out, it's not easy. You need experts for helping with that process.
My answer, it really depends on what your lifestyle is going to be when you make that transition from point A to point B. Obviously, you take the things that you need. And if it's your parents, you got to have that conversation with them. And if they can't make the decision, maybe you might have to make that decision for them. But always keep in mind, you got to keep them involved in the process. I'm going to say this is our last question. How can families avoid stress and conflict during this process? I'll answer this one first, ladies. Please have a conversation with your whole family. Can't tell you how many times I hear families fighting over some stuff. If they had the conversation, they wouldn't be in this mess. Well, what's your take, Andrea?
Thankfully, haven't had that much conflict. It's kind of handled behind the scenes, but I saw the way you looked into the camera when you answered that. So I imagine, you have worthy advice here.
Leslie?
Yeah, I think that's the key. Yeah. Communication, guys, solves a lot of problems sometimes. I mean, obviously there's exceptions.
These white hairs I have here are mostly the conversations I overhear from the families. I'm like, had you had this conversation, we wouldn't be going through this.
Ugh.
All right. So as we wrap up tonight, I'd like to reach out to our panelists and say thank you for being on this. I want the panelists to leave the viewers with one piece of advice for families considering downsizing. So, Andrea, you want to go first?
Just know that there's help. There's tons of advice. There's tons of resources just like this. Some libraries offer programs that help with downsizing. There's books, there's videos, and there's physical humans that will come in and really look through your stuff and help you. And I know it's probably something that feels strange. If someone come into your home and look through your personal items, they do this all day, every day. There's nothing they haven't seen. Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories.
All right, Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, I think downsizing is also a part of releasing. What are you holding on to that you don't need anymore? what would it be like to let go of some of that and moving forward and into that next chapter, and how would that feel, and sort of just allowing that change, which can sometimes be scary, you know, stepping out of that comfort zone a little.
That's really well said. Simplifying isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Well, that's kind of the point of why we put these webinars together, so people have an idea what the next move is. And even if they're not thinking about it now, this could be something that going to come to fruition based in a couple of years. So you might as well look at it now, start planning, start the conversation, start the dialogue now. So when it is that time, you know exactly what to do. I want to thank everybody again for joining us tonight.
Thank
A
you.
big thank you to Leslie and Andrea for sharing their knowledge and their expertise. If there is one takeaway from tonight, it's that downsizing doesn't have to happen all at once.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming when it's the right plan and the right team around you. Whether you're thinking about downsizing yourself, helping aging parents, or simply starting conversation for the future, we'd be happy to help guide you through this process. Our team proudly services Queens, Brooklyn, Long Island, the Bronx, all over New York. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a great evening. Remember, if there's anybody out there that needs any of our services, feel free to share this information with them. We're going to have a lot more things like this in the future. And thank you again for watching.